So this is the Cordova contributor biweekly Hangout meeting for the 15th of October 2020. We're here to chat about Cordova stuff, ongoing issues, potential solutions, proposals, etc.
And still only PMC. It'd be great if we could get some other people to come and be here with us, but we'll work on it slowly. Yeah, so you brought up a couple issues or a couple topics. Do you want to jump right on those?
Sure, I'll try to just touch on them quickly. These are basically just the things that I saw in my inbox this morning. There's a new major version of NPM that is released but not latest yet, Npm V7. The biggest change that affects us is that it no longer prints out the list of packages that it has installed at an installation, which breaks Cordova fetch. So Raphael, you had a comment there that you think that using their Apache package, we should be able to get the package name from whatever gets passed in.
Yeah, well, I had some thoughts, and I thought in many use cases, Cordova lib already has the packages, the names of the packages it wants to fetch. But then again, sometimes not. For example, if you add a plugin or a platform, then you just pass in a spec like you would pass into npm install, and that could be, yeah, basically anything, including URLs to some Git repos where you cannot, extract a package name out of the spec. So you basically have to fetch. You have to clone the repo to get the package name. But fortunately, there's a lib that npm uses itself, Pacody. It's basically the inner workings of npm that do all the package fetching, and it also has a method just for fetching a manifest, which is basically the package JSON. And it will do this for any spec you can pass into npm. So if it's a repo behind the scenes, it will probably clone it, build a tarball or whatever, and extract the JSON out of that. So doing this is quite expensive, but then again, Pacody also uses the cache of npm if you don't configure it otherwise, and that means if we're gonna install it anyway, and we have to fetch it anyway, for these unknown cases, we can also fetch the manifest. The package will then be cached. We can install it. We have the package name, and we can thus build a path to the package and can return it. So basically, we should be able to fetch it all, to fix it all inside of Cordova Fetch. Without the more major rewrite I suggested in the issue earlier. So yeah, I've looked into that, and I think it should work out. Maybe I can even post a fix to it like today, maybe. But I'll see. There's something else broken, it seems, but I have to look into that. I think we can fix it, and that would be great if we could be compatible to npm 7.
Yeah, my concern was that we'd have to like dive back into the npm internals. We used to ship a specific version of npm with Cordova lib, and that was not great for a bunch of reasons.
Yeah, I think we can do without that. We would depend on Pacody, which is part of npm, but I think that's fine.
Yeah. On the subject of other npm stuff and node dependencies, an issue that has started coming up that seems to mostly be Android. When we create a project and we install a platform, it copies the platform native project and a bunch of JavaScript tooling into the platforms directory. And because of how NPM works with nested dependencies in node modules, that means that the platform tooling from Cordova Android is no longer under node modules Cordova Android, is now under platforms Android, which means that when it requires something, it's now requiring the version from the top level node modules, not a nested version. This seems specifically to affect the exec.ca dependency, and I think it's a conflict with the Angular command line tools. So one of the things that we briefly talked about at, I think, the past Hangout was what the Electron platform is doing, which is trying to require all of its tooling from node modules, as opposed to copying it into the platform. I think that would resolve this problem, but that's also a pretty significant change and would definitely break the platform-centric workflow.
Yeah. I have a work in progress that actually applies what was done on Electron to Cordova Android. But it also, as you said, relies on first getting rid of the platform-centric binaries. I think you could probably do it without getting rid of that first, but it would be more work because you'd have to check that all the platform-centric binaries are still working, etc. So yeah, there's some work in progress for that. It's not quite ready because it also needs some restructuring, some refactoring, some, yeah. But I could see if there's if I can get a draft of it at least out there anytime soon, so it's visible. But I didn't get why don't we get the correct version? Because if we copy the node, we should copy node modules from under node modules Cordova Android if it exists, don't we?
If it exists, it gets copied, but it won't exist during the install. Like that only happens. Like it only exists. It's expected to exist when you're installing it from like a platform-centric workflow, because you're supposed to go into the folder, run npm install, then it has node modules inside Cordova Android, and then you would load that into your platform-centric workflow. But when you do a platform add, it's just placing, I think, only a few of the dependencies would probably exist, maybe not all of it. So,
conflicting ones, exactly.
Yeah, they should be still placed, but yeah, only the conflicting ones should be copied over. But I think the issue was because their package lock was outdated. There's something to do with the package lock. So when they deleted the package lock and rebuild everything, the dependency issues were gone.
Okay.
So I'm not entirely sure why, but obviously there was a workaround solution by just rebuilding the package lock.
Yeah, it sounds like there could be a couple issues there, right? I mean, if they've linked the platform, right? Because you can instead of installing it from npm, you can install it from a local directory, right? And you may have a package lock there, or you might have an older version of some of the dependencies that get copied over.
That would shadow your actual dependencies that you have in your project.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So I think in the long term, it's definitely best to do what Brian did for Electron, and run the tooling from node modules, because then we don't have to mess with copying node modules around.
That sounds good to me. If you do have a draft, I would definitely love to take a look at it.
Yeah, same.
Cool. Yeah, I can't give any ETA, but I'll try to get it out sometime soon.
And then the last issue that came up was that if you bump the Android target SDK version to 30, which is Android 11 and will be required next year, then a bunch of file URL stuff and access to things on the file system stops working. And there's a Chrome bug that someone linked where the Chrome team basically tells you that the only way to fix this is to use the Android X web view with the web view asset loader stuff, which I agree is probably the correct thing to do, but that does require moving to Android X.
Does this overlap with the issue of API target version that's being discussed on the list?
Very loosely,
Or it's just even more recent that we have to go all the way to 30?
Yeah, currently our target API version is 29, which is required by Google. 30 is the latest API and will start being required next year.
Okay.
So those are the only things that I wanted to bring up just as sort of background info for stuff that's going on. Nick, you have been doing a bunch of work figuring out how WK WebView and ITP break everything.
Yeah, it's been a funny year again after last year's mess. So I did some stuff, and since last year we are basically using a proxy. That's what I call it for WK WebView. I did this proxy for the Ionic WebView plugin, and now that we have WK WebView integrated into Cordova iOS, I think it may be a good idea to get this merged into the platform. And yeah, I'm not sure if anybody here knows what this is all about. I think some of you may know. So basically, it's we use the WK URL scheme handler for loading the local stuff. So our app runs on like what is it? Local Cordova //localhost, something like that. And I extended this to not only get local files but also get remote resources. So I can call any server using this custom protocol, and so the WebView thinks this is just a normal same origin request, and we don't have any problems with cross-origin blocking and cookie tracking prevention and this stuff. So the change isn't that big, but I would like to discuss it if we want this in the core platform or if it's a bad idea because it maybe promotes bad security decisions or stuff like that. So
yeah,
what
that would be my concern, is that we would be opening up a security issue. But I mean, do we have a way? I mean, is it still respecting our whitelist as far as where it can load from? Like, does it respect cores? Or is it just once you have this proxy, it's wide open?
That's a good point. The whitelist is a good point. So right now it's wide open. So you can use this proxy for any call. Maybe we should consider the whitelist in there too. So the proxy only lets request through that are allowed by the whitelist.
I think if we would do that, that would be a good thing. So you're not too wide open.
Of course, yeah. I never thought of the whitelist because my apps always have to deal with many servers, so the whitelist is always allow everything. But of course, if you use the whitelist, this should be part of it.
And you're always loading your own resources, or is there a level of trust there with some other servers?
It's basically, for my app, in my case, it's we provide the backend and the customer installs it on their server. And now the customer downloads the app and enters the URL to their server. So that's how we use it. And unfortunately, because of enterprise stuff, we still use cookies for authentication. And the changes in iOS 14 got this to break another time. So cookies, we loaded like images from the server. And previously cookies were used for that. And now iOS tells, or iOS 14 says no cookies are allowed to any cross-origin requests. And many other people reported that on the list or the WebKit bug, and Apple is still discussing if they should allow other solutions.
Yeah, well, I think it's a reality that you sometimes have to rely on cookies to do some authentication, because sometimes you don't have control over other systems. I mean, you can always build a proxy, but that's a hassle usually.
Yeah, we are using it for about a year now, and it works fine. And the funny thing is, while WWDC, the Apple Congress, they had some online sessions, and I booked a session for WK WebView stuff, and 2 people were part of these sessions, 2 Apple engineers, and they even suggested me doing right that after I already implemented it, because I think Julio suggested it to me. So right now it's not a problem from the Apple side, but we never know if they someday say don't do this.
Well, also there's a difference between recommending it for you for your app and recommending it for you for your framework for everyone else's apps. That I think we have to be aware of too, because a lot of times when you talk to them, they're just trying to solve your problem, not everyone's problem with your thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for your particular case where you need to talk to a bunch of different dynamic domains, this is probably the only way to accomplish something like that. I think that there are probably a bunch of people who have similar use cases with Cordova who need something like this. I also think that we do probably want to look into things like the WK app-bound domains that were introduced on iOS 14, which essentially allows you to have a list of, I think, 8 to 10 domains that WebKit treats differently. I don't know if that ends up allowing cookies and stuff like that. Apple has not defined what differently means very well. But I think that for the common Cordova case, what I think is the common Cordova case where you have an app that's talking maybe to 1 or 2 servers, it would be nice to have something built into the platform that doesn't require people to proxy all their calls through an extra JavaScript call. But Apple just doesn't give us a way to apply that to a number of domains.
The other option I thought about is building the proxy like for a plugin, but I haven't figured that out to do properly, because the WK URL scheme handler is built at start time of the platform and added to the web view before it gets initialized. So it's built into the WK configuration stuff. And if I want to do it in a plugin, so I had to reload the whole web view. Maybe I could do it. I did stuff like that in the past, but it wasn't that nice, so I tried to integrate it into the platform at first.
Yeah, I'm sure there's probably some way that you could look up the scheme handler at runtime in Objective-C and then swizzle some methods to add your own behavior to it, but I don't think we want to encourage people to be swizzling internal Cordova methods.
Yeah, I did this once for changing the host name the app is running on at runtime, but that was kind of crazy. And after building a proxy, I abandoned that. So what do you think? Should we proceed with this PR to integrate it into the platform, or just let it sit there for a while and see what other peoples are doing?
I'd like to have a look at the PR. I haven't had a chance.
So it's basically just extending the scheme handler we have anyway and doing some native calls and syncing the cookies with the with the cookie store from the web view.
In how far is this, or in how far would integrating this into iOS make iOS more powerful or behave differently from Android regarding cores? Because you probably can you do cores from Android? Can you configure it? I don't even know.
No, this would make iOS more powerful than Android, because you could use it to bypass cores on iOS, and Android would still have the cores restrictions. And on Android, I'm using another hack to get this working. So on Android, I'm switching the host at runtime. So if the user enters credentials for a new server, the app reloads to the same host as the server that it connects to. That's how I solved all my cookie and cores issues on Android.
As someone who builds both Cordova apps and browser apps, I'm shocked that it is 2020 and people are still dealing with cores issues. On web, we had to solve these back in like 2013.
Yeah, the problem is if the customer installs the server and configure it, and they don't do it in a way that we can use it. And even trickier, it's on iOS, for Cordova especially, is because we have two origins. On iOS, we only can use these custom schemes like Ionic or app : / stuff like that. And on iOS, on Android, we only can use normal HTTP or HTTPS schemes. So how do we configure the server? The server can only accept one origin header for our server and not both. So that's kind of a problem for us. It's a really niche problem, but it scares me all the time.
Yeah, I think the iOS WK WebView proxy, from what you described, sounds like something that we probably want to have supported. My only concern is that I'd like to have a non-proxy option available at the same time that we release that, so that for people who do only need to talk to one server, there's a way for them to set that up that doesn't involve rewriting all their code to use the proxy, and then we make a better option available for them later.
Maybe. So this sounds like we have to go two paths at the same time. So one is getting the proxy working, and the other one is maybe figuring out how to use the app-bound domains to get apps probably set up that have a set number of domains. Sounds good.
Yeah, my rough idea for the app-bound domains was to build it based on what's in the whitelist in config.xml. But we probably need a preference for whether to opt into app-bound domains or not. Because if you opt into it, then it does change the web view behavior.
Yeah.
Brian, I think you're muted.
Sorry, I was preparing an email for the removal of platforms centric stuff. Different topic. Nothing, keep going.
Anyone have any contrary opinions to the proxy stuff? Any reasons not to go ahead with that?
It's quite simple. I'm just looking at it right now. Yeah, we definitely need to make sure that we're not opening a security risk.
Yeah.
But
So
other
whitelist
than,
has to be part of this, of course. Yeah.
yep.
So I will do the whitelist part of it soon. So this sounds good to me, and I think we can proceed with the next topic. And the countdown starts. 10 minutes.
Yes, yes.
So I think in the chat I posted one thing. It was also based off the Android SDK stuff as well, and it recently came up in the email mailing list, and as well I noticed it when I was actually doing the review of a PR. So in the PR, it was using the build tools flags to represent like a letter, and sometimes like if you're building, like if the I guess from recent discussion a thread, if the compile time, if the compile SDK is lower than the version, then it wouldn't have that flag, and therefore the code would break. The thing is that we allow the users to change the compile time, the target SDK, even the min SDK with a flag, and based off like what we defined as min SDK and what we as target SDK, are we expecting that users could lower it down, even the compiled SDK lower than the version, and where this like flag issues would start happening? And obviously, like if the plugin said that, well, actually the plugin has a requirement for Android 9. And because we allow these changes, then that kind of causes an issue, because we're saying Android 9 min is 21 and max target is 29. So if they move it all down 27, it's going to break for that camera plugin. And even though the plugin says it's supported for 9, Cordova 9. So the question, I guess, is like, do we allow them, like, should we document somewhere saying what are the things we support? Because obviously Android, the Google Play Store, is going to enforce that everything has to be built with 28 right now, and soon to be 29, I think was what, November or something. But the issue is that non-Google Play distributions like enterprises, they don't have to enforce that type of rule. They may have older phones, they may still be building with older SDKs. So if they're using Android Cordova 9, which targets 29 and 21, and they pick something lower, and then they want to use this camera plugin, someone's using this flag, it's going to break for them. So that's kind of like what do we do in this case? Like, obviously we can just, you know, hard code the number so it won't break, won't fail. But I don't think we even document anywhere about enterprise support and this type of like information. So I don't know, like kind of hard to explain all this, but hopefully
Yeah.
kind of
Yep.
the issue.
The as far as the self distribution that's allowed in Android, we probably have to tighten our window of how far back you can go, just because of security, right? So patches happen all the time, and that's why we need to push people forward, because we can't support old code in an older version. That said, though, I do see the need for some flexibility there, but we definitely should tighten up that window. So not all the way back to, you know, to 9, but ultimately it's going to depend on the collection of plugins that you gather together for your application, right? That will define the minimum API. And if someone wants to build for an older API, I mean, they can use an older version of Cordova and an older version of the platform. That's still possible. It's not a well-traveled path, but it's still an option.
So I think Norman brought this up on the list, and I see that he's on the call. So welcome to your first Hangout, Norman. Did you have anything to add here?
Well, my major beef was that it was not documented. So, like, I approved that pull request with that potential problem. So I just wanted to define what are we supporting, and then have somewhere that we can point to, so that it makes it easier for newcomers who's contributed in code to know that, like, this is what we need to support in our pull request and stuff like that. So like, I don't usually think about non-Google Play distribution because that's not something I do at work, but now the question is how, like what Brian said, is how far back we go. To me, the logical is to use what our minimum SDK is, but I don't know if that makes sense either.
Yeah, that's the piece I was kind of getting at, because
Yep.
we say the min is 21, and that is very old. And if somebody really like lowered it to 21, everything to 21, which I don't see why they would do that, but
And I'll be surprised if everything worked as is right now if you are compiling with SDK 21 or 22 or whatever, right? Most of our tests is already done on our target SDK, which right now is 28 or 29, sorry.
It sounds like the issue here was mostly one of the constants used for marking a function as only being used in version codes P.
yeah, so
which,
P and higher. Yeah.
so that means if we would have added that code, they would need to use at least API 28 or compile with at least API 28.
Yeah.
So the whole thing is that once you added that, as he said, it's got to compile with 28. But even though we have said that our minimum support is 21, obviously, right? So if somebody wanted to go all the way to 21, that plugin would break, because that plugin says it's supported for Android 9, which has the minimum of 21. So because they have the ability to change the compiled SDK and target SDK, technically, I think from what we're saying, as the minimum being 21, they could set those to 21 as well. Obviously, they can't, release it to Google. They won't allow it. But if they were a enterprise, distribution, and they don't have that requirement, they're going to allow it. So we basically said our minimum support is 21. Every time we say, okay, we bumped our minimum. Oh, and we also bumped the target, but this is our minimum.
Yeah, I think the minimum of 21 is the minimum supported Android version that the app will run on. So that's what, 5.1 or something. I don't necessarily think that we should support setting the compile SDK version down that low.
So we have to document that piece of information somewhere saying that, yeah, even though we support your app will be supported all the way down to 21, you just cannot compile down to 21. It has to be compiled to at least 28 in this case. But or whatever. That's the problem. Like, what do we pick? Like, how do we pick it? Because like obviously we bumped to 29. That's what we're saying is the target, and I think by default is the compiled as well. But since they have the flexibility of going down, we have to make that decision of saying like, what is it that we are going to guarantee it will work? Because obviously, if we're managing like our plugins, we have to make sure that our plugins work for what we are saying that we will allow you to compile down to, because the plugins can only say like for the requirements based off of a platform, not based off of a SDK.
It says we have less than a minute, so we might have to finish this discussion on the list.
Yep. Or we could reconnect if it cuts us off. Continuing on, I can edit the beginning. It'll be seamless. We'll just have our faces in different places.
Oh yeah. So yeah, I guess the recap is that basically we need to figure out like how to define, like obviously we need to put this somewhere on our website, and then somehow we need to be aware when we develop and reviewing plugins, what is the target and compile time, I get the compiled SDK, because that information is missing, and without it, we can technically look and see the code runs perfectly with a Cordova Hello World app, because we're not changing the compiled SDK, so we're not actually verifying if the APIs that they're writing exists for the minimum compiled version that we allow, which we don't have right now. So
yeah, I think the slightly selfish but easy for maintenance option is to just say that we only support the target SDK.
Well, I would go with that too.
Where you start running into concerns with that is that the behavior changes sometimes when you go from SDK to SDK, such as what we discovered this morning with if you bump the target SDK to 30, then you lose access to file paths and stuff like that. I don't remember what the big change was in going from 28 to 29, but I'm sure there was something that people probably have reasons for wanting to stay on 28.
Those file system changes from 28 to 29, and you can get around that right now with a temporary flag, request legacy storage or something, but which kind of disables the file system changes in 29, but I think 30 is what you're seeing, that where it's kind of enforced. I'm not 100% sure on that detail though.
I mean, the other option, if this is showing up only in terms of us flagging specific functions or specific methods as targeting certain SDK versions, it sounds like if we just replaced build dog version code, but whatever with the numeric constant, then we'd avoid that problem. But I worry that that's just masking the problem and that you'll actually get compile errors when you try to build it.
Yeah, like, I mean, the build version is a very like simple thing that obviously it's not going to cause issues. But if you're talking about other APIs, that's definitely a concern. Like functional APIs, not just a constant.
So we move the version forward. Do we move it to be the same or minimum? What's
I
our
think
next
that's
step?
easiest, saying that we only support a compile, saying that we only support a compile SDK that matches the target SDK. We do have a way of changing the compile SDK through config.xml, but I think we probably want some sort of note that if you do that, we make no guarantees about support.
Okay. That sounds good. And I mean, as far as enterprise users who are distributing their own versions, I mean, we can wait for them to yell at us. I mean, it is a community, and if people are using it in that way, and we don't really see it, we need a way to find out, right? So hopefully they'll speak up.
Yeah, and maybe enterprise users don't upgrade their platforms so soon anyway. So
Yep.
I'm a bit lazy upgrading too. So the problem will be somewhere in the future.
Yep. Do we have any other topics we want to cover here this week? I put my my bio in the Cordova docs PR after I did a weird merge. I had to force push, but that's another story. But it's in there. So there's two.
There was one thing I was going to talk about, but it's probably a bit long to talk about right now. But I was basically trying to implement the plugin support for Electron, and I believe I may have come up finally with a solution. I was trying to prepare, I guess, a working example that I could have shared, but I had not completed. Like, I kind of got like a hard-coded piece of showing the connection between what would have been the plugin loading in and communicating to the web view and back, like the communications between them. And that worked pretty well. But now I'm actually working on making, like, I'm actually trying to add Electron support officially inside the device plugin, just a small, simple plugin first, and trying to get the whole piece to work, where I'm now hitting an issue with plugin add. Because what we want to do is when you add the plugin, because Electron has no dependencies and many plugins may have the same dependency but different versions, we want I guess the best solution would be that inside the plugin, the framework would actually be a folder of a self-contained node npm module, which you can like load. Or you could probably say point to another npm module that you've released outside of the plugin, whichever. And then that would install its module into the Electron applications package. So it's not going to be project level. But the issue I'm having right now is that the way we build the package is like everything from platforms template www. It gets put into this like staging folder, and then the client stuff. But during that entire process, the package.json is always deleted. So it's being rebuilt all the time, being replaced. So the information about what plugin that was added in there is lost. I know we have a platform manifest that's like up a directory, but it does not maintain, that maintains the plugin information as well. Like just this plugin was added to the platform, but it doesn't have any of the information about a sub dependency that was actually added to Electron. It's like a whole nother level. So that's kind of where I'm hitting a snag right now during the add piece. And yeah, that's kind of like, that's where I'm at right now. And I'm kind of getting stuck on that, like how I'm going to do that. I'm thinking I might have to somehow modify this manifest file and then pull it in and parse it to rebuild the package JSON every single time. But I'm not sure if there's a simpler way, or just create a separate manifest that's specifically just for the Electrons package that's outside of the Cordova's platform one.
I can look at that with you.
Okay.
Yeah, I can help.
But yeah, hopefully maybe by next meeting, we could have like a whole demo, probably, hopefully.
Yep. Yep. Sounds like a good goal.
Yeah.
Any other topics? Shall we call it? Do it again in 2 weeks' time. Great to have you with us this time, Norman.
Been a pleasure.
Yeah. See if we can get some more faces every time.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll see you all on the list.
See you later.
Bye.